much of that. You create a culture that is desensitized to facts. Okay, so you think about this. I mean,
Totally agree.
prosperity.
We're gonna have to get him a love offer.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you, bro. I totally agree.
prosperity preaching. You know,
They're gonna put a hit on you. They're gonna put a hit on you, Dr. Neal. Let me stop.
prosperity preaching, you know, has been very, popular in the black, society and everything. And, a lot of that prosperity stuff was built on false promises, false hope. The idea that God is like, Santa Claus, or God is this endless piggy bank that you can, draw from, or what have you. And what happened is that, they play with ideas about the kingdom of God and notions about, you being good. So Creflo Dollar, he's been successful because he'll say that, one's material existence is a consequence of one being faithful to God. Okay, that you've lived out, these values. You've given your tithes and offerings. Not only that, you've been living, morally pure in a certain kind of way, and consequently, you have all this money, you have these cars, you have these houses, and all that kind of stuff. Then when you look at it, you look at the number of millionaires that these preachers have produced. It's hard to justify what they're saying. You know what I mean? When you look at capitalism and how the system actually works. And so the point is that Black people have been victimized by the underside of religion. We have been victimized by the side of religion that exploits. Okay, and I can go back. Karl Marx. Who's classically known for criticizing religion as being a kind of opium, kind of drug.
The opium of the masses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have been led for far too long by these type of charismatic figures. They have contributed to our inability, our reluctance to think seriously about our issues. Think about this. No one criticized. Only a handful of people criticized Barack Obama while he was in office. A handful of Black people, that is.
Right.
People like a Cornel West or Tavis Smiley.
Right.
And those people, they got tremendous pushback from Black people and other people when he criticized Obama, and you have to look at the pushback. I got pushback. I was critical of Obama, and I didn't care, but and even now when I've talked about Obama in very unflattering ways in front of Black Christians, and just say, and the reality is that, we treated him like he was a pastor, not the president. He was the president of the United States. He wasn't the pastor of Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church or, Rockwell Church of God in Christ, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? And so we treated him in that capacity, and that has really impacted our politics in a negative way. The only minister, politician, preacher who has, transcended that or attempted to give us a model of something different, in his heyday was Jesse Jackson. So in his heyday, in his very prime, Jesse Jackson did a lot in terms of economics. Jesse Jackson did a lot in terms of putting pressure on corporations to hire Black people with college degrees, to be serious about affirmative action. That's a very concrete thing, but that's one person, okay? And so, that's the reason. So you can't talk about divorce. We can't talk about child support. We can't talk about
it.
Welfare, okay? We can't talk about the way in which that the United States government has functioned as husbands to women and as fathers to children. Okay.
Yes.
And
tell it, brother.
We don't have it. And yes, black pastors. Here's the thing. And you walk into a church, and you look at the congregation, and you look at who is the majority that's in the pews. The vast majority are women, right?
You're right.
Most of them are single.
Right.
And they have children.
Right.
Okay. All right. We've been seeing this, for decades now. All right. And the black pastor, he knows what's going on. He knows.
He knows
everything. Okay. And he, by choice, mainly he, because that's mostly men who are doing this.
Right.
By choice, does not address those issues. Does not address. In fact, I would go so far as to say that we talk about misandry. We're talking about anti-black misandry, the hatred of black men.
Right.
The black church has participated.
He's a full participant.
Yeah,
he's a full participant.
So when we talk about black men being absent from the churches, or black men not attending churches, you have to think about misandry, because the churches caters primarily to black women.
Right.
Okay. And what that entails is that oftentimes the black pastor will side with women in terms of how they interpret reality. Okay. Man. And so she's only going to have one narrative, a narrative that reflects her interests, and he's going to side with her. Who do we blame? Who do we blame for family dissolution? Who do we blame for what happens with the children? We're going to blame the father.
Right.
It's like, so the black church has co-signed the deadbeat dad ideology that has plagued us for decades. The church has co-signed that.
Right.
And the black ministers, regardless of the tradition, he could be Methodist, he can be Baptist, he could be AME, it can be within the Catholic Church, black Catholics.
Same demographic.
It does not matter that the black pastor co-signs a misandry, because what he says is that these black men, we have failed. We have failed to live up to Christian patriarchy. We have failed to live up to the standards of manhood, imagined standards of manhood they have that are in the scripture, New Testament, Old Testament. He's not being a Boaz. He's not being Abraham. He's not being David. All right. And there is no real analysis of what has happened internally within families, no real analysis in terms of what the government did, as Brother Scott articulated in the 1970s, in interfering. It was interference, interfering in the private lives of black people and going too far with this. Okay, and so that's why you don't have a politics that deals with the family courts, that deals with marriage and divorce and the fallout, which deals with father rights, which deals with co-parenting and children and every issue that goes with that. Think about this. Walter Scott, remember the guy in South Carolina? Okay, think about this, man. This guy lost his life. A police killed him. He ran from this police. And the reason why he ran from this police, because he did not want to go back to jail because of the issues that Brother Scott is talking about, child support issues. Mm-hmm. You see, and so the black church has worked against black men.
Yeah. And you know what? It's very, as I look at it from a mental health clinician standpoint, this is psychogenically damaging, not only to black communities as it relates to fatherlessness, because black men have always been, once again, the footstool to the advancement of all others and all other causes. We were the first to get killed in the Civil War. The Revolutionary War. We were the soldiers that fought for this country. We never got the love and the respect that we got. And somehow there's been some of a sublime reason where, some of our women said we oppressed them. And I've always said, listen, was there domestic issues between black men and black women? Yes, there was. But that's endemic of all ethnic groups.
Right.
And so black men and black women were beasts of the same burden. We were fighting together. And so when I hear this, black men oppressed us, I said, what policies did black men create to oppress black women? Because I don't know any policies. We were all struggling together, and when we were struggling together in unison, we were stronger communities. But just like the serpent came and whispered in Eve's ear, that's what some of these white liberals have done. they whisper in the ears of some of our women, and they're giving them the illusion of hope. And now you see marriage rates are dropping. Men don't want to get married no more because there's not enough visibility that's going to more or less amplify the causes of black men. And black men, a lot are suffering in silence. Listen, black men are killing themselves, man, because of this negative court stuff. Right. They're depressed because and got low testosterone. Homeless, got low testosterone because they don't have a voice in their homes or in their communities. But when we talk about it from a clinician perspective, we're always talking about it from the white liberal perspective. And I hear so many men, Dr. Neal and Gary, in my practice or when I do practice. You know, I allow these men to vent from a therapeutic perspective when they can share their story. And it's not more or less encapsulated by what I learned in college. It's just giving them a space, a safe space where they can share their thought. Because I'm like you know, we got to be radical in our pursuits and to demand what we want as men. Because God gave us dominion as men. And so I try to share with these men, you know, allow them the ability to tell their story. And you'll be surprised they're broken, man. They don't have a voice in their homes because just like they don't have a voice in the black church, they don't have a voice in their homes. And these black pastors, not all, there's some good black pastors, but a large majority of them are pimping not only our women, but they're catering to their needs at the expense of black men, which in essence is a detriment to the black community. And we can talk about racial profiling and police violence all we want to until we get the black family back on point, until we get a D.O.S-centric message that we had in the past. You and I and Gary Scott are just talking poppycock because you're not going to see any difference in our community. Our community is a cesspool of what it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
If you let me just jump in here on that, man, I really appreciate you guys understanding what I relayed because a lot of people don't.
They don't care.
They don't care. I've been protesting this stuff and trying to get the message out about the laws and stuff that affect. And what I get most of the time is that when I talk this stuff to married guys, they can't see it. But I have a close friend who just went through a divorce. Let me tell you, this guy works with children. He has a degree in social work, where he works at community centers. He works at daycares and mental health facilities, helping children. But through his divorce, he was only allowed 3 hours a week with his own children.
Wow.
Come on, man. I mean, how can the black community ignore stuff like this? And let me tell you, they did it all to produce a child support order because that's the only way the state can make its money is if that child support order is produced. Okay? So, I mean, it may sound trivial a little bit, but I'm guarantee you if you go look up 42 USC 655 payments to states, it will list the things there that the state is to be graded on and paid for based on their grade. I'm telling you, man, it's the most low down and corrupt thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay, but you know, when we talk about Walter Scott running from the police, right? And we look at these people who want to gun us down, just want to gun us down. And these people get qualified immunity. Okay, I think it goes deeper than that. There's some other kind of immunity that they're getting that they're not telling the public. Okay, so when you look at this stuff of police brutality against black people, right? I look at how the average cop in a city like where I live, Chattanooga, about 300,000 people, the starting salary for a police officer is $37,000. Okay, in other cities, they're just as low based on the standard of living or the cost of living. Okay, the people who carry the guns are the least paid. So I have a job. I'm an electrician. I get paid over $70 a year. Okay, yeah. Most construction workers make over $50. You got people who get minimal associate's degrees making over $50,000, $60,000 a year. You got fast food restaurant managers making over $50,000 a year. But yet, starting pay for a man carrying a gun who patrol our street is $35,000, $40,000. A nurse starts out with $45,000 to $75,000. So you look at all these professions, right? Look at all these occupations. Why would anybody choose to be a police officer? When you have all these other occupations available to you that's going to pay you more and put you in less danger. The answer is you got to be 2 pennies short of a nickel to want to be a police officer, knowing that you're really not going to get paid that much. So what's the purpose for somebody actually wanting to be a police officer? Either you got some evil agenda, or you want to take control of the people, you want to oppress people, you want to do damage to people, you just want to go out there and bully the public. I really don't think that people join the force to just want to serve. I don't believe that. You can go blow that up somebody else's behind it. I don't believe that at all. Now picture this: if the police department was offering salaries of $70,000, $60,000, what kind of people would you get versus the ones we have in now?
Right.
You would get common sense minded people. You would get people who honor the Constitution. You'll get people who respect others' rights to live and be. But when you get $35,000, $40,000 salaries, you're going to get the lowest, the bottom of the barrel of society to become police officers.
Well, what you're saying, you're right. What you're saying, Gary, is true. I went to school to be a cop. My first degree was in law enforcement. I got an associate's in law enforcement. And even though I didn't work as a cop, I did work in the prison system. And you're right. You had the dregs of society, and I'm not trying to more or less, put any negative light on people that work as correction officer, but I was a mental health correction officer. And also I worked in Department of Public Safety and Department of Juvenile Justice. And so they are not the most grandiose salaries. Correction officer was seen on the lowest of the total pole in law enforcement. And so you're correct. There are some people that have a what's called let's hurt Negroes, or they have more or less what I call a toy cop mentality, where they want to prove that they're tough and all that. And you do have rogue cops that have more or less profiled black men. But as me and Dr. Neal said earlier, that's not the greatest of our issues. That's an issue. It's an issue. It needs to be addressed. But the greatest issue, in my opinion, like I said, is mass incarceration, black on black violence, and infanticide. I'll probably say infanticide is number one. And we don't talk about that. And all these things were more or less predicated by liberal democratic policies that people don't talk about. I'm going to say it again. I'm neither Democrat and I'm neither Republican. I'm a registered Democrat, but as I've been looking at the policies of Democrats, if you look at it through the lens of theology, a lot of their policies are antithetical to the Word of God. And I don't see how people can more or less say, I trust and believe God if you're an Orthodox Christian, unless you're carnal-minded, and more or less believe in these policies when they are more or less a detriment to the Bible. If you look at the Bible, the Bible said that God is above Christ, Christ is above man, man is above woman. That's the Word of God. You can't miss that interpretation.
Right.
But when it comes down to men being in their homes, they believe in happy wife, happy life.
Right.
And if they don't do what their wives, right, and they don't do what their wives say, then there's some punishment, which is a form of control, in my opinion. And all of that is psychological. That's very damaging to men, to the point now a lot of men don't want to get married. They don't see the benefit. They say, get married for what? Why would I get married? They call it being on the plantation. I want you to talk about that, Dr. Neal, and from your experience, and also from the lens of theology as a theologian.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Men are thinking differently. Men have retreated, from the whole notion of marriage and everything. Existentially, man, I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I'm 47 years old, and I'm single. I'm unmarried by choice.
That's right.
And that's a lot of that's due to all the stuff that we're talking about right now.
Right.
Okay? And so I saw all that, when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to get married in my early 20s.
Right.
When I was in school, but I was deterred, because, we're talking about the 1990s and all the strong black woman stuff that was happening during that time, and the negative message that we got. The negative message that we got about masculinity during that era, and being a thinking person, I'm like, why would I sign up for this? You know what I mean? And then I never really found someone who I felt that I could have a permanent life with, because I grew up in a single parent household, and I did not want to. If I was going to have a family, I did not want to create another single parent household.
Right.
And I did not want my mother was never married to my father. I had a completely different worldview. I was raised in church and all of that.
So was I.
But to get to, here's the deal. So, the women talk about black men being oppressive, right? and black men, somehow having this, having their thumbs, their feet on the necks of black women. Okay, is contradicted by everything that we're saying right now. Okay, because if we had an actual patriarchy in black society, all this stuff that we're talking about in terms of divorce and child support and all that, it would not exist.
Right.
It would not exist. So the thing is that black people. Here's the thing. So black folks, we go to church. We're more invested, in religion than most other populations in this country. But we don't really uphold the patriarchal ethos that's a part of the religion. So Christianity, you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, you what you talked about from Ephesians in terms of how the household is structured, that's a patriarchal thing.
Right.
But the women have rejected it.
Right.
The women rejected. They've always, to a certain degree, have rejected the idea of submitting to a man. Okay, and I often tease the sisters by saying, black women are truly, you're not, if you were committed to submission, you'd be like Muslim women in the Middle East. Okay, and the reality is that they're not that way, and they have a strong, independent female culture that puts them first. Black men have basically surrendered to that culture. We have internalized the idea that black women should be the leaders of the household. We have, co-signed all of their interests and concerns. There are brothers who hear this type of conversation, and they are bothered by the nature of discourse because they have been conditioned,
right,
in a way to be feminist, male feminist, and to support all the interests, imperatives of the woman. So you talked about how black men have been useful to all these demographics. Yeah, a lot of that utility is the fact that we have given ourselves over. We have volunteered. We have jumped out the window, for demographics, particularly, black women. So we support the idea. So when the Democrats look to and cater to black women and saying the black woman is going to save, the party in the election, or they're going to save some politician, we as black men co-sign that. All right. So next to, black women are applauded, for voting in high numbers for the Democratic Party, but we are right behind them. Okay. So it's like, okay, they're 51%, we're 49%. Okay. Obviously, they got more numbers than us, so it's going to look bigger, all right? But we vote with them, you see? And what that means is that we are there. We have been sacrificial, and we don't have a patriarchal culture, all right? And the church, in all of its preaching and teaching, about, an ideal type of man, it only supports that in terms of the pulpit, in terms of high levels of leadership. But beyond that, if it weren't for women, you wouldn't have a church.
Right.
Okay? Once the women were to remove themselves, from the church would collapse. Okay. The black women, they fund it. Okay, the black women, whatever power a black minister has, a bishop has, he has it because the women have given him that type of power. All right, if they obey him, it's because they made a choice to obey him. Okay, and as soon as they decide that they don't want him anymore, he's gone.
Right.
Okay, and so she has the home. Black women own the household. You're talking about the 70%. That is her domain, okay? Black culture co-signs that. The American government co-signs that. White liberals, white feminists have been instrumental in supporting that entire condition. And so that's what, we have had to contend with. And so it's very difficult for black men to put their minds around this idea of black men being self-interested and thinking in terms of their own self-interest, because we have been trained from boys by our mamas, by our grandmamas, by our aunts, by our sisters. We have been trained by every woman in our family and in our culture that to be a good black male is to serve the woman.
Right.
Okay? Is to serve the gynocracy.
Right.
And so for some of us, that is so deep inside of us.
True.
That we can't see anything else.
That's true.
So the brother, so when Gary, Scott talks about a brother who recently went through a divorce, who at one time didn't see it, but now he sees
it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because he's gone through it. Because now he sees it completely differently. Okay. Right. Because his whole reality has been turned upside down.
Doctor, man, if you let me just respond to you, he's seen. This was a guy. That's when I used to be a Democrat, right? We used to debate, and he would put these brothers down, and y'all, he was like the idea. This guy wrote books about the father-daughter relationship. Very prominent guy, very intelligent. He had his own family, wife, house, and everything. And all of a sudden, his wife just jumped up and said she getting divorced, and he didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And though me and him didn't like each other, the only resource he had in my city was me. Mm-hmm. So I got with him and I taught him the law where he can go in court and be a pro se litigant and not spend all his money on a lawyer. I trained him. All right. The thing is, let me tell you something. This guy was so fearful. He talked all that crap on social media, but he didn't have talking about Democrats and how he didn't like them and all that stuff. But he didn't have the testicular fortitude to stand up to them Democrats that was wearing that black robe in that courtroom. And so you talk all that junk, dude, but then when it's time for you to face your enemy, you cower down, So this is what happened to him. He went in there. This is the classic story, the classic thing that happens when a woman wants to be away out of a marriage, but the guy's a good guy. He's a great father, good husband, but she just don't want to be. But she wants to, instead of her leaving and just taking what she owns and going, she wants the house, child support, the alimony, all that stuff. This is what she has to do to get it. She has to produce an altercation. She has to produce a fight, a literal fight. So she'll create an argument. She'll tell him something mean. He'll get mad and say something. While she has her phone recording, she's gonna record him. Bam, she got him. Call the police. Here it is. He threatened me. Blah blah blah. He gets took to jail. While he's in jail, she produces a order protection. He can't go back to his own home for 30 days. Now, 30 days later, he'll come to court. You got to go to court about it, where it may turn into a restraining order. Okay, you go to court, and I told him, man, I said, okay, she went down to get a restraining order or order protection. I said, did she even call the police on you? And she didn't call the police. I think she did this while he was at work or something, and she produced the order, and then it comes served him at work. He couldn't go back home. So she just said it. He threatened her or something like that. So he can't even go back home. And so he comes to me and I tell him what to do. Go to court and say, challenge jurisdiction and say there's no evidence supporting her claims. I want the case dismissed. Because in criminal situations, you have to have evidence and witnesses. She had neither. I said, go in there, invoke your rights, stand up for yourself, and they'll drop the case. This Negro goes in there, and of course she lawyered up, right? He said when the lawyer realized that he was going to challenge it, she asked the judge for recess. She walked him outside of the courtroom where nothing's on record. Oh. And she said, if you don't agree to this restraining order, you won't see your kids for the rest of your life and all that stuff. Scared. He heard up, signed it. He signed it. And he took it back into court, and the judge said, is this what we're doing? Damn, he couldn't see his kids for 3 hours a week. He gave it to him. I said, why didn't you listen to me? He pissed me off because I was in Waffle House praying with this guy, trying to build him up, stand up for himself. He crying and stuff because he losing his family. You know, now he got a child support order on him.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? This is the common thing that happens.
Yeah.
And these women know the game. And in men's groups, it's called the silver bullet. Mm-hmm. When a woman makes a move to get you hemmed up with the law, and while you're locked up, she moves to get custody of the kids, she gets that divorce decree started, everything. It's like it's classic, goes on all over the country.
Yeah. And when you think about that, it's very nefarious. To say the least, Gary and Dr. Neal, is very nefarious because, you know, when you think about the suicide rates of men that most people don't talk about, the suicide rate is radically up among married men that have been impacted by divorce. But see, a lot of mental health clinicians, we don't talk about that because, you know, the profession of clinical therapy is more or less a pink collar profession, where, you know, men really, you know, certain things you just don't say. And so when a lot of our professionals have been more or less indoctrinated by ideologies that are anti-traditional and more or less male or anti-conservative, then a lot of times, you know, those points of reference are not even heard. And so, you know, and so what people don't understand, you know, you got groups like, what's the name of the wedding stores, like Zales, the ring store, and you got bridal stores. These stores are losing business, man, because of what we're talking about, because the laws are unfair and there's not equity in the law. And because there's not equity in the law, like you were saying, it's having a very negative impact on the black community. Because I said this, Dr. Neal, that a class of warriors can rise no higher than the elders in that class that push them to warriorhood. And if you don't have a class of warriors, how can we protect the women that say they need protection? Yes, they can get their own guns, but you still need male leadership in your communities. But it's almost like some want the protection of their men, but they don't want the cooperation. They want to do things on their own turn. But at the same time, the man, he doesn't have a say-so. And I see so many men in therapy that are more or less struggling with that because they feel like they don't have a voice. They just kowtow to what they've been trained to do. Like you were saying, you know, especially a lot of our men that were raised by single moms, they do what's best for the nest instead of doing what's best based on principle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and this is, I mean, these issues are serious, you know, because, you know, most men at some point in their lives have children, okay? Or they might get married or what have you. I mean, it's only, you know, you have a population of men who don't do that, but most men, the majority, you know, do that. We have to interact. Here's the thing. Our most basic interactions that we have, there are two genders, and I know that people talk about other genders, but male, female, right?
Right.
And we have to negotiate, you know, that other side, okay? And the part of it has to do with these intimate relations that sometimes develop into marriage, which come with children and what have you. And so, yeah, this stuff affects us psychologically, and you know, unfortunately, we don't have the tools or the language, and it's only now, with all the technology that we have, that we are able to talk with one another. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with O'Shan Gadsden. O'Shan Gadsden, he's a professor. He teaches in the counseling over in Virginia, and he's also a therapist as well. And and I've been in conversations with him with these same issues. You know, that, you know, clinicians are not trained to deal with Black men issues. You know, and I remember even in the 90s, I had to be very careful about some of the stuff that I read. Written by some, you know, Black folks who were in psychology and in the related areas, because it was always bent towards the woman, you know what I mean? And so yeah, we have to give, you know, Black men the space and the tools to do this, and, you know, and overcome this long history of us being, you know, these stepping stools, being the servants, being, these slaves, within our communities. And Dr. Johnson, he calls them ConcuSerfs.
ConcuSerfs, right.
That's what he calls them. You know what I mean? Right. And so we have to break out of that. And a lot of it. I mean, it's a very difficult thing because, like I said, we are taught so early to be men in that capacity. And it's tied to religion. It's tied to slavery. It's slave religion. It's it goes back to, the antebellum South, the idea of Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, he was a slave. He was a servant. He was the good servant, and we have to break out of it. And it's a part of this black male agenda, this black male politics that we have to create.
When you think about a black male agenda, you and I, we talked about it earlier. If you had to craft a 20, if you had to craft what I say, like a 20-point or 25-point black male agenda, what would it look like? But before you say so, Martin Luther did the 66
thesis, 95
thesis.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how many. I don't know what the number was, but Martin Luther did it as a rebellion to the Catholic Church. And if you had to craft a 20-point thesis as a rebellion to liberal politics, as a rebellion to a matriarchal system that does not more or less respect their men but want taxation without representation, what would it be, Dr. Neal?
Yeah, I mean, it would be around, the issues that we're talking about now. You know what I mean? And it would have to prioritize black male interests, and a huge part of it, and for me, a huge part of it is economic. A huge part of it is economic because we have been disempowered economically. We have been removed from the chessboard. We've been removed from the economy. So here's the thing. In order to fight the family courts, in order to fight the criminal courts, you've got to have money. You've got to have resources. You got to have finances. This is a huge political undertaking. I mean, you're talking about a bureaucracy because you have you have people whose careers are built on this. I mean, you have a whole, profession. Social workers get paid off this. Judges get paid off this. Lawyers get paid off this. You know what I mean? All sorts of professionals, are being funded by our pain and our disposability. And so we really have to deal with these, with these economic aspects, of our situation. And so I think that's a major priority. And then the other piece of it has to do with education and educational underdevelopment. So black boys, and as Gary Scott was talking about earlier in terms of the school, which sounds like just a vocational school for black and brown kids, and it sounds like the old Booker T. Washington model of Tuskegee, and basically, as you were talking, I thought about that old Booker T. Washington Du Bois debate, because the whole idea Du Bois says, you can build people up and give them trades and skills and all of that, you know what I mean? But your economic interests have to be protected by law. And and so they're not going to protect it if you don't know anything about the law, okay?
Right.
And if you're not invested in you being protected, by the Constitution, you having your interests represented as a taxpayer. So you need to, and I would say this. So here's the deal. Over the years, we've had all these movements. We can go back, Marcus Garvey had his movement. When you read Marcus Garvey, you read Garveyism, I mean, there was a program, there was an agenda that was there. When you read the Nation of Islam and you look at what Elijah Muhammad did, and you look at what Muslims want, all you gotta do is pick up a final call, and it's right there in the back, When you look at the Black Panthers had a 10-point plan. All right, all of these are points. All these are agendas that were created by black men.
Right.
They were created by black men, and the thing was, these agendas were not just for black men. They were for the entirety of the black population. Okay,
Correct.
So the thing is that the Panthers, they dealt with prisons. They were concerned about prisons. They were concerned about employment. They were concerned about health. They were concerned about legal representation. They were concerned about a plethora of things that deal with our basic needs. And so we have to deal with an agenda that is very concrete. The reparations politics that is current right now. That's what we have to deal with, and we have to black men really get our minds around the economic aspects of this. So when men are hit by divorce, most of the men I've known who've suffered divorce, it's devastated them. We don't have devastated. Yes. We're not a people that have wealth, and we transfer wealth from generation to generation. We're not like a Donald Trump who can marry 3 times and can he can live with being hit financially by divorces and all that and paying alimony. We can't. We're nowhere in that world. Okay, and so that's financial. Having children, man, that's financial. And dealing with helping young black men understand what it means when you bring a child into the world and the responsibilities that come with it, the consequences of it over the course of a child's lifespan, the economics of even getting married and what that means, and so as someone who was invested in economic interests, for me, that is at the center of an agenda, okay? And you add the other stuff, you add the health part to it, and the additional mass incarceration, all the other stuff. But we have to get our economic interests in line, and that's where. And again, I'm not. So the thing is, I voted Democrat all my life. I'm not a committed. Right now, I'm not a committed Democrat, not about to become Republican or what have you. Right. But the thing is that looking at interests, and so Donald Trump is talking about particular kinds of interests, economics, and any politician for me who's really concerned, I don't care what side he's on, or she is on. Right. If you're dealing with these economic interests that are impacting me, I'm all for it.
No doubt. Right. And that's why I said politics more or less has to encapsulate black men being the leaders in their homes, supporting and loving our women, and then also the development of our black children. I think when you take those core variables out and put those in place, then it becomes important. And I say that as a black male clinician, no disrespect to my white brothers, because I got white brothers and sisters, but they know that historically black people have been at the bottom. Historically, we have been the negative benefactors of racial profiling and slavery. And not saying that we have to be internal victims, we have to look at the systemic effects of it. And so because of that, I'm a proud advocate of advocating for black men, black families, and the black community. Because once again, we can talk about racial violence, police violence, all we want to, until we get these families back in control, where men are being men, when men are being taught to be men based on principle, not emotion, we're going to have the same negative effect that we're having now. If I had to craft a 10-point or a 20-point, black male agenda, I think one would probably be punishing those that are more or less complicit in paternity fraud. Paternity fraud would be one. Changing the current divorce law. Doing something about mass incarceration. Domestic violence, something that's more or less that we don't talk about, but domestic violence is more or less started more about women than men, but we don't talk about that. And so
40% of all domestic violence victims are men.
Right, and they don't talk about it because they are silenced, because they're very ashamed. And so, I think I called up about 4. If I had time to write it down, I'd probably come up with 10. But those are that's part of it. I think legislation needs to be done about infanticide. I think if a man get a woman pregnant, he should have equal right equal rights in saying what he wants as it relates to his seed, because it's his seed. Because if a man get a woman pregnant, it's her body, her choice. But if the man say I don't want a kid, it's still her body, her choice. And so I think men should have that same power, the same right to speak. And listen, I know, Dr. Neal, that some of the things we're talking about is not mainstream, it's not PC. You know, you're a professional doctor, I'm a professional clinician, and we're probably the minority. But however, but we're the minority that's speaking about it, but there's a solid majority that believe in what we believe in. So what's your take on that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think that the big thing is that we have to have a politics that removes the interference of the government from our lives. If it doesn't remove it completely, it lessens it. So the problem is that we have the government is too entangled in our personal lives. Less government is the best government.
Right.
And so government reduction. So we have to decriminalize. Here's the thing. There's so many aspects of black male life that have to be decriminalized. Okay? And so you have, people, we've decriminalized marijuana. I mean, we have to decriminalize fathers, okay, in the courts, and decriminalize them in a way, okay, where they can have greater choice, greater autonomy in relationship to their families. So yeah, I'm completely with you, and I would say to the family piece, kind of writ at large. Yeah, I mean, we have to really talk about the extent in which our family structures are failing our children. This present arrangement, and I was having a conversation earlier this week with another broadcaster dealing with this, is that our family structures are failing our children, particularly our boys. So black boys are coming out. We have the 70%, black boys are being under-socialized because you don't have men in the home, because you don't have male figures who are sharing authority in the rearing of black boys. And so that means that we have to continue to talk about the family in terms of, the overall development of black people. We have a lot of underdevelopment among us, and a lot of that underdevelopment is directly tied to these family dynamics that we're talking about. So divorce it doesn't positively benefit children. Okay, children being raised by one parent, particularly the mother, does not positively benefit children. We have the research is there. We have decades of research which concludes, okay, that children who are raised with two parents have better outcomes than children who are raised by one parent. Okay, and so to say that and to articulate that is to present a narrative that goes against the status quo. It's been, and here's the thing, it's been the conservatives. It's been the conservatives in this culture, the black conservatives and even the white conservatives, who have been talking about this. And the fact of the matter is that they've been correct. They've been right about it. And we have to use this instrument right here in pushing it. And we have to talk about it and talk about it loud.
Right.
And not be concerned about the fallout. Women need to hear this. Black women need to hear this because they have been protected from the type of evaluation that would contribute to better outcomes when it comes down to our children, particularly black boys.
I want to give my 10-point plan, which I agree with you a lot, or totally on what y'all said. The one, correcting family law, that would be my first agenda, because if we don't correct that, none of the other issues are going to be corrected, in my opinion.
No, I think,
if we don't correct the government's involvement into family matters, before Title 4D, if you got divorced, you would go to court and just have a regular court case, and you would have to get a jury and stuff like that. But do you know that in family court cases that juries are not allowed? Think about that. That's your 7th Amendment right, trial by jury. Okay, let me say it. But what that does, what that 7th Amendment was created for, was to stop judicial corruption. Okay, because the public, when you have a jury, you're inviting the public in to preside over your case and to say you're yay or nay, guilty or innocent, instead of the judge doing it and the lawyers, because the judge can be paid off. Okay, it's a little bit harder to pay off jurors because you don't know which ones they're going to pick. You see what I'm saying? But you can pay a judge off, and it happens right to this day. That's why the 7th Amendment was placed in there, because there was judicial corruption. There were people in power doing things to the public that shouldn't be done. There were judges carrying out judgment that made no sense. There was people who are clearly being done wrong, and the judge would decide against them. So the jury was put in, so your peers, people who are just like you, people who live next door to you, around the corner for you, work the same job as you do, these will be the people presiding over your life to say you're yay and nay. We don't believe their ends. And a lot of people don't understand, and these are things that we should learn in elementary school. The importance of each amendment in our lives, the importance of free speech, the importance of a right to bear arms, the importance of a trial by jury, the importance of the 13th and 14th Amendment when it comes to slavery. You see, but the thing is, we don't know. And when you don't know your rights, it makes it very much easy for them to violate your rights and take your rights from you. And I want to comment on what you said before about protecting our interests. As I read and studied through all this family law stuff and men's rights and black people's rights, what we really have is what we have the ability to protect and defend. If you can't protect and defend it, you really don't have it. And that thinking was birthed in me by a guy, pretty wild-minded guy, a preacher on YouTube. His last name was Manning. He really was coming down on black folks. And so, but my thing is, I don't get offended by people like that. I listen to them, because if they're passionate about something, it has to be something to it. And so, and when he made this comment that black people have never built a ship that was seaworthy, and I had to sit back and think about that. I said, wow. And that's what led me to think about militaries and stuff, and people who, all the countries have their own military to protect their interests. What do black people have to protect our interests? If we built something so great, how can we protect it? Do we have a military? Then I thought about Muammar Gaddafi, how he was going to unify the African countries under the gold dinar. And then who went over there and killed him? You see what I'm saying? Hillary Clinton.
Right. I see your point.
You see what I'm saying? And so, but the thing is, even though economically it would have been bad for America, bad for Europe,
good for Africa.
Yes, it was good for Africa. When you make those type of decisions, you have to have the backing, the military backing to protect it. And that's what he didn't have. And that let me believe, when you build something up in this world, if you don't have the wherewithal to protect and defend it, you don't really have it. And that's another point that black folks, on the agenda. Whatever we create, we need to have the ability to protect and defend it at all costs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so you have to think about Tulsa, and Black Wall Street.
Black Wall Street.
You think about Rosewood, and the other places that no one else talks about in history, Jim Crow South, where black people built something. And it was destroyed.
I want to interrupt. I gotta leave. I got an emergency right here.
Okay, go ahead, brother. Okay. It was a pleasure. All right,
good.
Go ahead.
Good, yeah, but I agree. We have to be able to protect our interest. And so we have a lot to overcome. There's a great deal of work. We're at ground zero. I tend to kind of, use the analogy of the Twin Towers, 9/11, and we just observed this recent anniversary not too long ago. And, we are like, what happened to the World Trade Center, and we have to build, and it takes time. And we started off today, and I said that my work is about dealing with the situation of decimation, the decimation of the Black male population, and it's very real and it's very deep.
Right.
And we are at the ground floor of putting something forward. I know that we appear to be on the margins, and that we are folks whose voices only represent a small number of people, but a few, a prophetic few, a vocal few, has proven over the course of history to be influential. Okay,
no doubt. Right.
And so it doesn't take 40 million people. Okay,
right.
All you need is a critical mass of individuals who have a set of priorities, who are committed to following them and articulating them in public, and I see that happening today. I see Black men communicating using technology, and I see communications happening in ways that I couldn't imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And we had no voice, and so the voice is there. You and I are able to have this conversation, and I don't take that lightly, man. I think
I don't either.
I don't either. Technology is a tool. This is a tool, okay? The printing press, the television, the telephone, all of that. Those have been tools that we have used in service of our own liberation struggles, and so I'm not a person who's cynical. I'm excited about what's going to happen next.
Well, same here. Reverend Whitfield poised something called the Great Awakening. Mm-hmm. When I think about you and Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, I call it the Great Black Male Awakening, where we're coming together en masse. And we're talking about seminal issues that are more or less impacting us. And we're saying that, look, men in the barbershop are saying it, men in private are saying it. They're all saying the same thing, so there must be some truth to it. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And what men are saying, look, give us liberty or give us death. Because right now what you're dealing with is a type of social taxation without representation. But also you're going to what's called a form of cultural Marxism that's more or less predicated on the cancel culture that says you better not say nothing, you can't speak out. If you speak out, you're going to get punished. And so what a lot of men are saying, okay, bring it. Because if I die, so be it. If I die, so be it.
Yeah, and that's the mentality that one has to have, and I've said this, on Dr. Johnson's platform, and I've said this on other platforms, that I'm committed, to pushing forward, an agenda that's going to empower us, that's going to enhance our lives, and it requires sacrifice, and it requires going through the fire, any great advance in history, comes with challenges. It comes with, opposition, and one has to count the cost, and when you look at our movements, the people who led us, and I mentioned these people earlier, your Garveys, your Malcolm X's, Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, all these folks, the Black Panthers, I can go on and on and on and on and on. We know that these people counted the cost in their lifetimes, okay? They were not, people who were deranged or anything like that, but they committed to something. They committed themselves to something, something that was much bigger than themselves, something that drove them. And, I don't see how one is not willing to endure the darts and the bullets and everything else if you're really committed to, a certain set of ideals.
Well, you've been a theologian, about not only the peril of politics, but you also know about the peril of speaking truth to power. You know, our greatest example was the prophet and the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And Jesus lost his life for speaking truth to power to the masses when his message was not necessarily popular at that time. And we live in a culture and society now that believes in what's called, what's the word, postmodernism, where they use idioms like your truth is your truth, my truth is